There we go. Good morning, everyone. This is Nina Stack. I'm president of the Council of New Jersey Grantmakers, and we're so pleased that you could join us this morning. And Congressman MacArthur, I'll start off right away saying how thrilled we are that you could join us. Unfortunately, the cause is not anything we would want, but we're very grateful that you've made the time to do this. I just want to give a little bit of background about what the Council's been doing in the time since Hurricane Sandy, in the years since. And what we're hoping today will help with. The Council of New Jersey Grantmakers, as many of you know, our role is to help the funding community, the private funding community, do the best that they can with their resources. We provide a lot of professional development and issue-related briefing work. And so within the Monday after Hurricane Sandy hit, we hosted our first of what became 25 different funder briefing calls every Monday almost, and through the end of March of 2013. Mondays at 4 o'clock we had our briefing calls, and all of those were recorded, and we have since been able to have written summaries done of all of those calls. All of that information is on our website for everyone to access. We've believed in trying to get the word out as much as possible. We created a listserv for funders both in New Jersey and around the country who wanted to keep apprised of what was happening, how they could help, what they needed to know. We've maintained that listserv. It is still active today. We encourage people to use that as information becomes available, and we've used that. We've used that to promote the call today. As the articles started coming out about the fraud in the flood insurance program, we would push those articles out through that listserv. We also did 2 site visits for funders in the months following, one that was in Ocean and Monmouth County, and the other that was in Essex and Bergen and Hudson County, that were very successful. And of course, we created with our partners, the Center for Disaster Philanthropy, the Disaster Philanthropy Playbook, which is a tremendous resource. It's evergreen, so it continually is being updated with information, strategies that funders can use when disaster strikes, whether they're a housing funder, a mental health funder, early childhood education, whatever their focus area is. We've worked to have the strategies that funders can use when a disaster hits put into that playbook, and the website disasterplaybook.org, or disaster playbook, disasterplaybook.org. As the news began to break about this fraud, Kathy Durante from Ocean First Foundation, who's been such a tremendous resource for us, and for the entire philanthropic community, and I know she has been also for the nonprofits, just essential to the nonprofits that are on the front lines of the recovery. We began talking about how we could help the funding community understand what this has meant and how it affected what they wanted to do and what they were trying to accomplish, but more importantly, what they need to know now as they think about strategies and responses to continue to help the victims of Hurricane Sandy. So we are so appreciative to have a great group of people to help us understand that on this call today. And we're so appreciative, Congressman MacArthur, to have you kick things off and help us. And what we've done with these calls is that we'll have some time for Q&A. Sometimes people aren't in a position where they can be live in their question, so I just want to let folks know you can feel free, as we've done in the past, to email me if you'd like me to pose the question for you. And my email address, I think that you should all have, but it's my name, NINASTACK, @CNJG.org. And so if someone would prefer that I pose a question for them, or it works better that way, don't hesitate to email me. With that, I'll say, Kathy, is there anything that you'd like to say at this point, and then we would turn it over to Congressman MacArthur.
I just want to say thank you to the council for hosting this call. I think, as you kind of outlined there, it's just at this point it's kind of critical that everybody gets a fresh update on what's happening in all of the local communities and the impact of what's happening at the federal and the state level. So just my thanks, and I'm looking forward to hearing everyone and what they have to share today, and hopefully it'll give us a roadmap to move forward.
Terrific. Thanks very much. Congressman MacArthur.
Yes, well, Nina, thank you so much for hosting this, and I appreciate the good work that the council does. Before I share a few of the problems that I have seen and what I think are some solutions, I want to say that my first involvement with Sandy was not as a member of Congress. I wasn't in Congress then. It was actually as part of the funding community, and as a neighbor who saw people struggling around me with the aftermath of Sandy. My wife and I run a family foundation. My wife runs it actually, and I'm the secretary. But we saw a lot of emergency needs around us, people that weren't going to make it for the next two to 4 weeks if they didn't have some help. And so we had started to make grants to people to get them through the emergency part, just to be able to hang on. And the need, as all of you know, you've been very involved in this, the need was so great that after we set up the St. Peter's Sandy Relief Fund, we ended up funding it not just once, but we ended up doing it 4 times between late 2012 and 2013, because there were just hundreds of people that couldn't make it another week or another month if they didn't have some help. And I want to say a word as well about my involvement with National Flood, because I think it'll help you understand when I comment on the problems I see. I was in the insurance industry for 30 years. I started as a field investigator actually in the New York City housing projects back in the early 80s. And I finished my career as the CEO of a large insurance service company. We had thousands of people around the country working in that space. And in the middle of my career, I ran catastrophe operations for a company. And one of the things I did was flood work, because flood is the most common peril out there. And so I have been involved in many, many flood issues and claims over the decades, and I understand how that program works pretty well. So fast forward now to my being in Congress and starting to hear from constituents about some of the problems that they were having. And there are 3 that I want to outline because they really speak to what happened. And then I want to talk about a few things that I think could be a way forward for us on this program. The first problem was recoupments. And this came to me at one of our legal clinics. We were doing legal clinics along with the Ocean County Long-Term Recovery Group, and trying to help people understand how to navigate the program. And a woman came to me. She was the mother of a special needs child. She gave me a letter from FEMA, which was demanding that she repay about $30,000 that she had been granted. And the letter made it clear that she hadn't done anything wrong, but there had been a mistake. They had thought the application was covered, and they'd made this payment to her, and now they wanted the money back. And this woman had spent the money, obviously. Her home was destroyed, and she was trying to make it work for her family. And this really struck me as just really unfair. And then I discovered there were thousands of people getting these letters from FEMA. So I introduced legislation that made it impossible for FEMA to try to recoup funds unless there was applicant error or fraud. And then I added a 3-year statute of limitations, so FEMA couldn't do it forever, because they were still, as I discovered, making recoupments from people from the Katrina event.
Oh my gosh.
And so, and this is what this does to families. What this does to families is rips them apart after they've spent the money getting their life back together again. So, The broader non-recoupment has not moved as quickly as I'd like, but I was able to get the 3-year statute implemented in the FEMA reauthorization bill last year, and that helps because we're now 3 years past Sandy, so at least if we can move that through the Senate and to the President, at least the recoupments will stop. The second issue that came to me also came from constituents, this time quite a few of them, but one family in particular. They had taken a small business administration loan to repair their home. And those loans are, as many of you may know, they were made available to homeowners, even though the SBA normally focuses on businesses. And it seemed like a lifeline to people. What they weren't told clearly was that if they took the loan, it might make them ineligible for other programs. And so this family discovered they couldn't get a REM grant to elevate their home because they had previously taken an SBA loan. And again, it struck me as inherently unfair. A loan that's secured by your home is a mortgage. And getting a mortgage, a second mortgage, or even a third mortgage on your home is certainly not as helpful as having a grant that doesn't have to be repaid. And so I introduced legislation that would eliminate that conflict and not make a loan a grant. And this one I'm also fighting to push through slowly through Congress. There are people that don't want to make the change. The third has been the most troubling, and Nina, you alluded to this, and that's the mismanagement fraud even at FEMA. And I assume you're all aware of it, but let me just give a brief perspective on how this came to see the light of day. In February of 2015, 60 Minutes hosted a program, and on it they had the FEMA's head of the National Flood Program, the top guy at NFIP. And I'll quote what he said because it's really telling. He said, "I have seen evidence of fraud in reports used to deny them full insurance payments. I'm not going to sit here and conceal the fact that it happened because in the last 3 weeks I've seen evidence of it." What he was talking about is engineering reports that had been altered. So somebody would inspect a boiler, for example, and write under the photograph, damage caused by flood. And then he'd have another photograph that was sent to the insured where somebody had doctored it and wrote, damage not caused by flood. And that would be used to deny the claim. Further, he went on to say that he had seen signals of these problems, or FEMA had seen signals of these problems in late 2013, a year and a half earlier, and FEMA had done nothing about it. Unfortunately, that director of NFIP didn't stay very long after that 60 Minutes program. But a number of things happened. One, I called for hearings. The entire New Jersey delegation demanded that files be reopened, and tens of thousands were reopened and tens of millions of dollars were repaid. And I'll get to the Inspector General report that came out of the investigation that was done, but to me the question of motivation was never really answered. Why would engineers or adjusters or write your own insurers or anybody in this process, why would they deny claims when they get reimbursed 100% for their efforts and for what they're insuring? 100%. They gain nothing by denying those claims. And so that's why I've been demanding hearings. The re-review process, as you all aware, also has had problems. And I've got affidavits from 7 whistleblowers, one of whom joined me about 2 months ago in the Capitol. And he said they were directed, all of them have said, they were directed to not cover covered items. They were directed that their re-review had to be within a certain range. And if they were out of that range, they wouldn't be, their recommended payment wouldn't be approved. So it started to look like the second review process was also fraught with mismanagement and possibly even fraud. And so I have, again, been calling for hearings. I want to know, and we deserve to know, who directed this and why. Because I just, after being involved in this program for so long, I know how it works. Nobody has a financial incentive to do this unless they were directed to do it. Nobody. And there's too many people involved in denying my constituents and my colleagues' constituents up and down the coast, our citizens, being denied claims because somebody is trying to have things come out in a predetermined way. And then the third piece of that, the mismanagement and fraud, the Inspector General's report came out a couple of months ago and just excoriated FEMA for a lack of internal controls. And it's led me to the conclusion that the very agency that was created to help people after disasters has been kicking our people when they're down. And this isn't trying to make political hay out of something. This is just the sad fact of the matter, that the very agency that's supposed to be helping people, that's its mission, is actually hurting people, sowing confusion, denying rightful claims, trying to recoup funds after people have already spent the money. One thing after another, they have been making life miserable for thousands of people. And so that leads me to what I see as a way forward. And I think first and foremost, FEMA needs to pay all rightful claims. They are starting to respond to the pressure. They have talked about some reforms that they've outlined. I don't think this is the time to let up on the pressure on them. And I believe that there needs to be accountability at FEMA. It's why I've called for Director Fugate's resignation or ouster by the president, because accountability has to start at the top. And I've seen no accountability in that organization, and I have continued to press for hearings, and I'm working in Congress to try to get hearings to answer the question, who directed it and why. The second piece is, and this is very concerning to me, the reauthorization of the National Flood Program is coming up next year. And there are loud voices in Congress to shut the program down. And all of this fraud and mismanagement is not helping at all. It's actually emboldening and encouraging the people that don't want the program in the first place in Congress. I am engaged actively in trying to keep the program alive. I've met with all of the people involved in the reauthorization. I'm trying to get involved in the committee that does it, because we must have, for all of the flaws, we have to have a federal backstop, or people won't be able to afford their flood insurance. And ordinary people up and down the Jersey Shore will be forced out of their homes because they can't pay the insurance, they can't afford to lift their home, and the homes will be worth far less than they are because the buyer will also have to incur large insurance costs. We have to have a national flood program that helps with catastrophic coverage and that helps keep the cost of insurance low. So this at the moment is among my, other than getting individual claims paid, which we do every day in our district offices, the next highest priority for me is getting this program reauthorized and not killed. And then the very last thing, and then I'm happy to take questions, is the Stafford Act itself. That's the act that authorizes FEMA. It's different than the National Flood Program Act. That's a separate piece of legislation. But the Stafford Act is what creates all these grants. It's what allows the federal government to come in and aid the distressed communities. That program, I think, was designed in a way that doesn't help communities. And I'll give you just one example. Second homes are not covered at all. You can't get a grant or aid for a second home. And I guess the idea was, if you can afford a second home, you don't need the help. And we all know that's simply not true. A lot of these second homes are small bungalows up and down the coast. Many of them were inherited. Many of them are a source of income for middle-class families. And I want to get that program changed so that second homes are covered. If we want to have a cap so that the truly rich don't get federal aid. I'm perfectly okay with that. I think that's reasonable. But we've got to help communities rebuild, and it's hard to do that when hundreds and thousands of second homes sit unoccupied, and it hurts local small businesses, dry cleaners, small restaurants, and pizza places. They all suffer when thousands of homes are sitting unrented. So those are the things that I'm focused on going forward, and I think I'll stop there, Nina, and see if anyone has any questions.
Oh, thank you, Congressman. Incredibly enlightening, and I feel like I've tried to stay up to speed on a lot of this, but there are things that I didn't realize at all, and I'm so appreciative of you joining us today. I'll say, does anyone have any questions for the Congressman? I'm thinking.
Nina,
yes, please go ahead.
This is Trevor.
Hi, Trevor.
Trevor Newman, the Ombudsman from Tom's River. Congressman, like you, I worked in the insurance industry my whole life before my rebirth here. Excuse me. And one of the things that I find very troubling, as do you, is that this seems to be a directed force of reducing claims. In my experience, I never was faced with that, so I have to think that this is a relatively new concept. Do you have a feel for that?
Well, Trevor, I have very carefully come to the conclusion about it being directed because fraud is a crime, and you don't lightly accuse anyone of that. The problem is, as I said earlier, there's too many different people involved, from write your own companies to engineers to independent adjusters, all of whom have no financial interest in reducing claim payments. Because if they make a payment at any level, it's reinsured 100%. If they perform a service, it's completely paid for. So I can't conclude anything other than that somebody directed it, and that's why I think hearings are so vital. We have to know who and why. There's a couple of possibilities. They may seem implausible, but I think you have to think of everything that could have driven people. For one, the National Flood Program's balance sheet was in pretty poor shape after Katrina, because Katrina was a terribly managed event, and as you know, lots of money was spent and then never got used to improve that area. Instead, it got moved to other states, and so it's possible that this was directed to make sure there was no overpayment. It's possible it was directed to make sure that the flood program's balance sheet stayed strong in advance of a reauthorization. It's possible, in my mind, that the second review process, the reopen process, was a big cover your tail exercise. And that people didn't want to admit that they had made mistakes the first time, and so they created these tight ranges. I don't know, Trevor. I just know that the people of New Jersey deserve answers, and I don't see any other way to do it than to put people under oath at a congressional hearing until we know what happened, and that's why I'll continue to press for hearings.
Well, I support your efforts, and if there's anything that I can do from this level, let me know. In 2005, I had the opportunity, working for a major company at the time.
Trevor, it's very difficult to hear you.
In 2005, I had the opportunity while working for a major company to handle their flood administration for all except Katrina. And Congress did not reauthorize the funds for a 2-week period, so we were handling and settling claims that we couldn't pay. And if ever you want to have a conversation with a customer and explain to them, yes, you've got coverage, yes, we're handling your claim, no, we can't send you a check, that's not a good day. So if we can avoid that, that's a really big deal.
Congressman, with the reauthorization that's coming down, and you said that there are voices that are trying to shut that down. And you make such, and I actually know it personally, the impact of second homes, that these are not it's actually the majority are not the big houses that you see on the beach. That there are inherited houses or small bungalows, and they're paying for themselves through rentals and whatnot. I'm wondering, and I'm thinking about our philanthropic community and the ways in which philanthropy can play a role. Obviously, foundations aren't going to lobby; they can't do that. But I'm just wondering if there is anything out there that you see that there's a way that private philanthropy might help shine a light on this and the benefits of why the flood insurance, why it plays such an important role. If you're aware of studies that have been done or any work over the years, because I'm even remembering Hurricane Hugo. There was, again, that was 30 years ago, I guess, maybe now, in South Carolina, and the issues then for the National Flood Insurance Program and not wanting to reauthorize.
Well, you mentioned actually two separate issues, Nina. The National Flood Program is a subset under FEMA. It's a separate program under FEMA's, broad disaster relief authorization, which is called the Stafford Act. So the limitation on second homes is part of the broader Stafford Act. The flood program itself, which is the program that's up for reauthorization next year, that does cover second homes, but obviously people are paying the premiums for that. And here's the issue there, and there may be things for the not-for-profit sector to do here. Here's what can happen. If somebody is in the National Flood Program and they're in let's say one of the lesser intense flood zones, they may be paying $1,000 or $1,500 a year for flood insurance. If they suddenly move to a high-velocity flood zone, and I've seen it, so I know these are not exaggerated numbers, you can have your premiums suddenly jump to $25,000 or $30,000 on the same house. So we're talking about a make or break situation. And that's from a change in flood zone. If the program is eliminated and moved entirely to the private market, private companies will only insure where they can, what are called actuarially sound rates. They'll have to charge that full rate to cover the home. Unless there's a federal backstop, they would be on the hook for the entire amount of damage from any flood event. And think about in my district, I have more seniors than any place else in New Jersey. People on fixed incomes, even if their flood bill went from $1,500 to $5,000, it could make or break them.
Right.
They simply can't afford it. And now their one asset that they have built up for retirement is worth less than it would be because the buyer is going to incur that higher flood rate every year, not just 1 year, but every year in their ownership. So I think the funding community, and I don't know all that your members do, but this may be an opportunity to actually do a study that shows the impact on communities if the flood program lapses. The program, in the minds of some people, is very individual based. It's all about, and this is why some members of Congress don't like it, well, it's just helping wealthy people on the shore. Well, first, it's not just wealthy people, as we've talked about, and it's not just individuals. It's whole communities that are affected. And in fact, it's not just New Jersey, it's up and down the eastern seaboard. And so, there could be an opportunity, Nina, for not-for-profit sector to do some studies that show the devastating effect if we don't have this program.
I realize it's not just the shore, because my personal experience was on the Delaware River in a house that flooded 3 times. So
yes, yeah. Well, that's right.
You're absolutely right. The impact on the community and not just the individual. That's quite. You've crystallized an approach for me that I hadn't been thinking about. So thank you for that. From Lambertville, New Jersey, is where my experience was from. So.
Okay. All right. I know the town very well.
Yeah. So I'm very conscious of the time. And you've been very generous with yours, Congressman. I'm wondering if anyone has any other questions for the Congressman. And hearing none, then we'll move on, because we're going to hear from Sue Marticek. And we've got others. Carlos Rodriguez is with us, and Robert Kley, and Trevor is going to talk with us a bit. And Congressman, you are very welcome to stay with us if your time allows. But we will also know that we will stay in touch and are so grateful. And if there's anything we can do, if there's any information you want us to help push out to those that we can reach, the council is available to do that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nina, and I'm happy to join you anytime.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Congressman. So now we'll turn it over. Sue Marticek, thank you, from the Ocean County Long-Term Recovery Group, to update us on where your work is at.
Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me okay? I have a headset on.
Yep, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great. First and foremost, I really do want to thank the council for their continued involvement and support of our recovery in our state. I'm just going to follow up on Congressman MacArthur, who really has been with us since before he was elected, when he showed up at our general meeting, and has been a partner in this from day one since he walked into Washington. So I so appreciate his effort, his ear, and his advocacy in many areas to do with this recovery. One of the points that I really wanted to bring to light was Congressman set up the issues and problems in this recovery, highlighting the NFIP underpayments, and I just want to give the perspective of how those underpayments have affected our recovery. And I can confidently say that I believe in my heart the number one reason why we are not further along in our recovery in New Jersey is because of the underpayments from people's flood insurance. And I can say that because we, as the Long-Term Recovery Group, received 100% of our funding from the philanthropic community. And I can tell you that we have given out $5.8 million into the communities to help them fill their gaps. And 80% of our clients had flood insurance. Now that's really important. 80% of the homeowners that we helped at our unmet needs table and provided funding had flood insurance. That number is way off. It should almost be the opposite. They should be receiving their flood insurance and then getting up to a $150,000 grant from the state's REM construction program, and then the funding should be ours. But because they were so horrifically underpaid in the beginning of their budget, they had to turn to the REM program. And then even after getting a $150,000 grant, that still did not come close to reaching their needs. So then they turned to us at the Long-Term Recovery Groups, and we filled in their gaps with dollars that you guys provided to us. And I don't think that is the most effective way to use our donated dollars. We filled in a gap that should have been filled in by the federal government through their flood insurance program, which is not a gift, it is a contract. that people paid into for decades and only to be underpaid. And I can say that even more confidently now because as we have evolved in this recovery, so has the long-term recovery group. We've made twists and turns and adjustments in our program. And the last one was when all this came about, as the Congressman said last year with the 60 Minutes, that we decided that our homeowners are so beat down at this moment that the thought of reopening their flood insurance claims and asking them to go back to day one in this disaster and try to put forth an argument why they're owed more money, we realized that many of our homeowners were not going to be able to do that, and therefore they would be missing out on an opportunity to get funding that is rightfully owed to them. So we decided, when cleaning off the whiteboard and coming up with a new program, we decided that we were going to hire 2 insurance experts that we could run all of our clients' insurance paperwork through so they could at least give them a summary of what they thought they were underpaid or not paid for at all. And again, how does that happen? It happens because one of our funders, we went to ask them if we could possibly please switch some money over from unmet needs so that we can pay these consultants, because we strongly felt that that was indeed going to be the best way to get additional unmet needs dollars for these homeowners, was really through their flood insurance. We're closing in on our final $200,000 of unmet needs monies to give out to homeowners. So I can tell you in the year that we've been doing this, we were able to get $2 million back to homeowners through this NFIP initiative that we did. But what it also allowed us to do was to see case after case. So we have collectively about almost 350 cases of flood insurance claims. And I can tell you they are across the board underpaid. It is not one-off. It is systematic, and the system did not do right by these homeowners. But what it did for us in the community is it made us spend our dollars really keeping people's heads above water and then filling in huge gaps just to get one homeowner across the line. So the effects of not paying fairly on those NFIP claims, it has had a severe impact in New Jersey.
I just want to say what a brilliant strategy to focus on having the insurance. I'm just writing it down. I want to make sure we get that somehow into the playbook in terms of helping to support hiring insurance consultants to help the clients. Sorry, I'll be quiet now.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, the other option for homeowners, and many of them did, 5,000 people went with for-profit attorneys. And I have nothing against attorneys, but we felt strongly, oh my God, these people are going to need every penny of that additional dollar, and to think that getting the opportunity to get additional dollars and then having to feel like you need to hire a lawyer, which is going to lose you 1/3 of any new money coming in. So we really tried to figure out how that we could do it. And any service that we do is not, there's no charge to the homeowner.
Right.
So, and to be very honest with you, we have had actually more success of getting cases through than the for-profit attorneys, because I think when you are going at this with a nonprofit angle, we get doors open faster, we get conference calls quicker, and I think that they realize that we're just basically doing this for the good of the client, and therefore I think that we have been able to move those pieces a little bit faster than some of our counterparts that are working with the lawyers. So it is still a challenge. I can tell you this has been a battle that we fight every day. And matter of fact, this afternoon I'm on a 2-hour conference call with FEMA again to try to straighten this out, because I cannot stress enough to FEMA, to the state, and to everybody on this call, the longer the disaster goes, the harder it is to get these people back home. And because of the underpayments and then the confusion with some of the problems on the state grant program, we're sitting here 3.5 years later with people who are hanging on by a thread. I will tell you that it would be a rare day that we don't have some client or somebody in the community calling us because now they're receiving foreclosure notices, short sale notices. And it's really a shame, because our homeowners did nothing wrong. They paid their taxes, their mortgage, their insurance, and they really are getting the short end of the stick. So we're at 3.5 years plus, and we are still working aggressively to try to get the next person across the line. But we know that the resources are depleting, and I will tell you that we have $61 billion that was brought in from the federal government for this recovery. And then you have throw in another $500 million from the philanthropic community. And you know what? I do not think we got the best bang for our buck with that amount of money. And I hope that two things. One, it's great to be working, moving forward, and I'm with everybody. I got one foot in recovery and one foot thinking, moving forward, how do we make this better for next time? But I don't want to lose sight that there are a lot of people, I mean thousands of people who are hanging on by a thread right now. And unfortunately, across the board, the resources have gone away. So if there is any way that we can put our brains together and figure out how we can, once again in the community, come out and provide this last safety net, because I don't think that our communities can hold on for much longer. And I think our economic impacts are not even beginning to be felt, because I think once we really do get the dust settling and figure out how many people don't make it back home, I think that is going to have a tremendous impact in our communities.
Thank you, Sue. And so I think we're going to turn it over to Carlos and hear about some of that impact and how things are going on the hunger front. Carlos?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Nina, and good morning, everyone, and to the entire Council of New Jersey Grantmakers for continuing to give some of these voiceless neighbors of ours a voice. And Congressman, for your continued support and leadership and bringing to light, again, some of the intricacies that are creating a reality that we see within our network. So I guess a great point, a great start to just highlighting some key points is to talk about what the long-term impact in our community will be and what we're seeing already, the impact of these shortcomings of disaster recovery for the reasons that have been stated earlier, how they're manifesting in hunger and food insecurity. Just a little bit of background. Immediately, or as Sandy was hitting our shores, we were finalizing a count of the number of people that we see as a food bank in our network of over 300 programs throughout Ocean and Monmouth County. And we were serving at that point just over 130,000 unique individuals. Immediately after, actually 2 years after Sandy, about 1.5 years, 2 years after Sandy, we did an environmental scan of our programs, about 60 programs, and asked them, how many families are you still seeing that were directly impacted by Sandy and you're seeing for the first time? That number was as high as 10 to 15% overall. And as a result of that, the First Lady's grant here in New Jersey and many other funders stepped up and allowed us to put more resources on the ground. Just a few weeks ago, we did a similar, more concentrated scan on some of those programs that we knew are in key areas where we're affected or where we saw migration of folks a little bit inland, and some of our emergency food providers were seeing or had been seeing families. And what we found interesting is that no less, it ranges from 5% of the total people that they're serving, the total number of families they're serving, so as high as 50 to 60% of what some of our pantries are serving in some of those key areas are still families that were directly impacted by Sandy.
Carlos, Carlos, I just want to interrupt you for 1 minute. It's a little hard to hear you. You're sort of coming in and out. I don't know if you have a way to...
Okay. Is this a little better?
I think so.
Okay. So the point is that a number of the pantries that were serving families before continue to see families that are directly impacted by Sandy, from as little as 10% to as high as 50 to 60% of all the families that they're seeing have had some direct relation with Sandy. And some families continue to find their way to emergency food or their need to emergency food for the first time, even now in 2016. To compound that, our food bank does just more than just provide food for immediate needs. We run a large outreach service which connects families to needed resources such as SNAP, earned income tax and child tax credits by preparing free taxes, and enrolling families that don't have health insurance into the public or the private health system. And all in all, we're reaching about 5,000 unique families. No less than 5% of those families are now saying, or we're finding, are families that had a direct impact, that were directly impacted by Sandy. A large percentage of them are now in need of SNAP benefits, which are formerly known as food stamps, and a number of them are coming to us for tax assistance, having no other resources to go and prepare the taxes the way they may have traditionally done. So they're now, I guess the point of the story is you're seeing, and Sue said this great, they're being beat down to the point where they can't rebuild themselves back up, never mind their homes. And what we're seeing them is becoming more in need of the traditional safety net, whether it's emergency food or whether it's some of the programs that we know make up the safety net for many low and working class and low income and working class and neighbors in our community. We didn't expect that we'd see none just a few years out. We know this is long term. However, we are a little taken aback at how much we're still seeing, comparatively speaking, and this being the community that we are. We're also seeing in certain pockets where programs are telling us, and this is anecdotal evidence, but worth stating anyway, that families are just moving out, especially some of the most vulnerable. Some seniors are just packing up and leaving and just turning their backs. I'm not sure if this is going to show up in other reports. We will be looking to see if this is being captured in other research. But I think all in all, between both effects, the food insecurity effect, the increased demand on emergency food, and the increased need for being a part of the traditional safety net, we're going to see a changing landscape in our community. We're already seeing a changing landscape in our community. And I think like so many things impacting emergency food or that drive people in emergency food, it's not necessary. This is a completely avoidable and solvable problem, especially the underlying conditions. So I guess the sense of urgency is, the food bank has been increasing resources through our partners from over 60% over the last few years. We don't see that as a solution. Emergency food is not a solution. Taking care of these root problems, and in this case, the underlying causes of why families are not able to get back in their homes, why they're not being able to rebuild their lives and focusing on career choices and career pathways. Those are the things that we have to solve so that there's less reliance on emergency food, because the system is already stretched and strained. And I guess so the request here is that we're considering action. I think advocating more for some of these programs and making sure that key programs stay in place for when the next disaster comes is critical. Otherwise, we will be at a breaking point come the next disaster, and then be compounding the problem more and more if the solutions don't work or continue to work the way they're working now. So I think I'll stop there because it's a bit to digest, and for the sake of time, I'd love to hear some questions and kind of maybe react to some of those.
Thank you, Carlos. Are there any questions at this time? I have to say I was struck by your the idea of when the next disaster comes and how to ensure that the programs are in place is something that continues. Elizabeth Murphy and I were just talking about that yesterday, and very much on our minds, and how to help the funding community understand what's needed for the long, and how they can think about and help their grantees to be prepared. So I would just say whatever we can do, and as you, as one of the grantees, thinking about that to keep it in the mind of funders so that there's some plans in place when the next disaster comes. I know we heard in December, we heard from Bill Somerville, who's based in Berkeley in San Francisco, and how his foundation has agreements with their grantees on what they can count on when disaster strikes, of what they will be able to provide, that they're fully prepared to issue checks so that they can keep going and not have to worry about that. And I think that's one of the things that we really want to keep that in the mind of the funding community, of thinking that through. Questions for Carlos?
Now, the San Francisco model is quite innovative. I had an opportunity to go and meet with them and kind of share our stories a few years back, and it's a nice turnkey process. If you happen to be operational as a human service provider or not-for-profit engaged in disaster, all you have to do is prove that you're operational, and then the checks flow, and you can do what you plan to do, and the planning is a very collaborative process. I think it's quite comprehensive. It takes into account not only what may be needed in a disaster, and every disaster is different, so there are some similarities but a lot of differences, but also making sure that there's an infrastructure in place to tap into resources that we know are continuous and become even more necessary when there are large groups of families and individuals in need of support.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so then let's switch to Robert Kley. Am I pronouncing that right?
It's Kley.
Kley, who's with us to talk about the mental health challenges that so many are still facing, and give us a briefing on that. And thank you so much for being with us, Robert.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity, and for the council, and then for the congressman and everyone else on the call today. I can echo everything they're saying, and we'll try to keep it a little focused on the mental health side of it. The Mental Health Association has been involved in the disaster relief project from the beginning. We were the provider, the statewide coordinators of the New Jersey Hope and Healing Program, which was the FEMA crisis counseling program. And as that ran through, then we continued to continue our services through grants with Red Cross, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and the Sandy Relief Fund. One of the things that I think when we're talking about mental health and its response to the Sandy and the dollars that flow, is that we had a lot of dollars come in right in the beginning for treatment and services that were wonderful to have, but the recovery wasn't at the point where people needed those services. And if you look at some of the planning that FEMA uses, they kind of put a disaster with a wonderful chart that goes up and down that basically says you're kind of recovered by the 18th month, and there's spikes when people need services and when they need outreach. And I think for Sandy, because of all the delays that happened with people being unable to start their actual recovery in concrete services and create concrete ways, they didn't focus as a general rule on mental health services and what they needed. Those things were put at the bottom of everyone's checklist of things to do. And as the congressman and Sue described, the recovery gets longer, we're pushing out the need where people can really realize and utilize a lot of mental health services further on down the road. So now we're close to 4 years out, and there are people that are still haven't come to that point where they need those services. So where we are now, most of the mental health services that are out there that were identified for Sandy have gone by the wayside. There are a few programs still running. Our mental health association services also started as community outreach, and then we evolved into seeing what people really needed was case management that also could understand and focus on the emotional issues that were involved. So we developed a couple of projects in Ocean and Atlantic County called Recovery Peer Outreach Support Teams that worked with the most vulnerable populations. We were looking at the elderly, people with mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and really kind of evolved to we were working out with these cases, which were all referred through the case management systems and the long-term recovery groups, to really focus on a holistic approach to people's recovery. And I think we had lots of success in doing that. And when mental health is most effective in getting people engaged with services, that's the approach to use. So right now, our program ended in March, actually a couple of months ago. But we are still, with other resources, trying to keep in touch with the clients that we were serving, which was about 600 or 700 in Atlantic and Ocean County. But we see people now struggling. They don't have the support that people need. I think as Sue clearly pointed out, as you get further away from the recovery, it becomes more complicated, especially for the most vulnerable populations. And I think that's and you really have to continue to outreach and engage folks that way. As it was just mentioned, we have people now picking up and leaving New Jersey. We see that happening a lot with the elderly. There's a lot of reasons why that happened, and from housing reasons to social reasons. But from the mental health perspective, I think a lot of it is we're looking towards future disasters and the community response, whether it's from government and the private grants. We really have to look at the timing of the resources and looking at a lot more flexibility. It's not just offering services, it's how you get people connected to those services, supported, and look at it in a much more holistic manner, and setting up a disaster response system that engages mental health as part of it, not just as an ancillary section of it. Because right now, people that need mental health services that may not have the resources or even have the resources, they're now having to get it from their normal insurance or from a public system that provides mental health services that's underfunded, that's under a huge amount of stress. So there's less opportunity for them to have access to services moving forward. There's a lot of challenges here, but I think as we look forward, if we can look as on a broader perspective of integrating the mental health disaster response into case management, into other kinds of outreach, and look at it in a much more creative way of connecting with people and providing those services, we'll have a much stronger outcome.
Great. Questions? You know, I'm struck by when we did our funding, one of the first funder briefing calls that we did right after the storm was with John Davies, who runs the Baton Rouge Community Foundation, and he spoke with us about several of the initiatives that they had created there, and one of which was a mental health program that they developed right away after Katrina. And at that time, the best practice was that mental health needs that you would need to be prepared within 6 months. That's when the clients would start showing up, and it would be 6 to 12 months. And what he said was that it absolutely was more like 12 to 18 months, and that they were disappointed. You know, what they learned is that they'd spent their money in advertising the services too quickly, and that he wished that they'd held back on that and ramped it up. And I think you've reiterated that, and we've learned a lot from that. It's something we've tried to roll out to our colleagues around the country, depending on the type of disaster, and that was said before. You know, what they had learned before was based on 9/11, which was a very different kind of disaster, and Katrina obviously, and to Sue's point, and you mentioned it as well, that the delays have pushed everything. The delays in the recovery here have pushed everything back, and so it's why it still continues. And we've got one more. Trevor Newman is going to join us to talk about the housing impact, and then we can open it up for some other questions or commentary or thoughts that people have that way. So Trevor, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. As you all may know, I'm the Ombudsman here in Toms River, and I kind of coordinate inquiries from the public regardless of what their subject matter is concerning the storm. I have some interesting housing numbers that I think you'll put this all in perspective. Probably the first thing I need to be sure that everybody understands is that the state essential services funding has dried up completely. So now we're on our own. We did get some help over the 3-year period, but we're now on our own. But let's talk about the rate base for Toms River. By the way, I know this is Ocean County long-term recovery, but this is limited to Toms River. We're still about $880 million behind in ratables from the date of the storm, which doesn't take into account any appreciation that might have occurred had the storm not taken place. So as you can see, we're still in a dire straits.
I'm sorry, Tom. I don't understand what that means.
The rate base is the total number of properties, the amount of money that's assessed against the total number of properties in the township for the rate calculation for you to be able to pay your taxes.
So, but when you say you're $880 million behind, that's what I didn't understand.
We're $880 million behind on the ratables. These are properties that were damaged and removed from our rate base because of the storm and have not come back yet.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Just to put the numbers into perspective, does everybody understand that there is a difference between substantial damage and damage from the storm? Substantial damage requires that the building be brought into complete compliance with the FEMA regulations, and in most cases that's elevation. As you drive anywhere in Ocean County, you see houses up on cribbing all over the place. In Toms River alone, we had 14,000 impacted properties, 4,000 of which were substantially damaged. Now, we're doing okay, we're moving forward, but we still have a long way to go. And what I'm finding now as I get inquiries on a daily basis is that the people are running out of money. They've exhausted any insurance that they may have had or not had. Their personal, the amount of retirement money that has been poured back into these homes is astounding. And all that means is that the retirement is uncalled for. So moving forward, we're moving forward with of the 4,000 substantially damaged homes, which are the most severe, we're about 70% completed, and that's based on permit counts and inspections. That's a pretty good number, but we are almost 4 years into the storm. So when you put that out there, that's pretty sad. Moving forward on that number alone, on substantial damage alone, we've had 1,045 permits to elevate houses, of which only half are completed, 547. So we're moving forward with that as well. The big thing for us is trying to keep up and help everybody that we can when we don't have any funding at all. People assume when they call the township that we have a funding source that we don't have. So we can help with the mechanics and we can help with the particulars. I spent a lot of time with the DCA on the phone in Trenton, and certainly with working with Sue on a monthly basis. I attend all their meetings. But as a township, we're moving forward and we're doing as well as we could hope for at this point in time. One point that I need to make, though, is we're coming up on a compliance date. For those people that were substantially damaged, the requirement is that they put their house back together within 4 years. from the date of the storm. Now, that comes up in October. Those people that were insured get a bonus because they get a 2-year extension. But that is an important date, and we're going to have to send out notices to folks that are not in compliance, and we're not looking forward to that.
What happened?
Well, at this point in time, what we're expecting is their insurance premium will go up, certainly. On top of that, there is the problem of long-term, whether there are going to be any kind of fines or penalties. DEP has not gotten back to us with a definitive answer on that.
It was interesting because I was thinking about, if they didn't bring it into standards, they could just do that. And then the challenge is that when they try to go and sell the house, it's not sellable.
Well, the thing to keep in mind is that the designation, substantial damage designation, goes with the property. It doesn't go with the owner. Right. So it stays with it until the house is brought into compliance. Now, that doesn't mean you can't sell your house. You can. But in the sake of full disclosure, you have to disclose the fact that it is substantially damaged and will need to be brought into compliance. That is a negotiation tool if I want to overstress that point.
But in terms of, you can repair, raising the house, elevating the house becomes, it's not repaired unless it's elevated. Is that right?
Right now, we have a program where if you come in and commit to raising your house within 4 years from the date of your permit, we'll allow you to repair it and live in it until you do. But that's a 4-year extension that only applies if you come in for your permit.
So you can't repair your house and live in it if it's not elevated, unless you've got that permit.
That's right.
Wow. Okay.
All right. Now, and I'm not going to be so naive as to think for 1 minute that people are not living in houses that should be elevated. The governor, in an emergency order in January of 2013, said that you could go ahead and fix your house, and you didn't need permits with the exception of electric and plumbing. So we've got a lot of people that went ahead and listened to the governor and jumped right in and did repairs, and they're living in houses that are on the books substantially damaged and need to be elevated. We're working to try and contact those people again. We've already sent a series of letters out over the 3-year period, and in the near future we'll be sending a 4th letter.
Thank you, Trevor. Questions for Trevor?
Hi, this is Elizabeth.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks to everyone for all of the really important information that everybody has shared today. Trevor, I'm just thinking, so if there's no money left in the REM program, and if we are still looking at thousands of homeowners in Toms River and up and down the coast who need to elevate their homes, how do we actually think that's going to happen? That's a lot of additional money. Where's that money going to come from?
Let me share a couple of REM statistics with everyone so that they can put it into perspective. And again, these are Toms River numbers only. As we speak, 85% of the REM money has already been dispersed on those projects that were approved. That doesn't leave a whole lot of money. But when you look at the numbers of houses or number of customers, for some reason, the number of Toms River REM-eligible participants has shrunk in the last 12 months by 10%. Now, I don't know where they went, and I don't know why, but the sheer numbers alone reduce the participation by 10 points. Now, Toms River, because of the severe damage that we had, we represent 15% of the total REM program statewide. So when you start to look at those kind of numbers, I can only dream of what's going on in other townships that don't have the impact that we had.
Right, and you're only 15%.
That's right. Well, let's put 15% into perspective. There are 9 counties, and God only knows I don't know how many municipalities that are in the REM program.
Right.
We're only one.
Well, and that's exactly why, I appreciate you continuing to clarify that you're just speaking about Toms River, but it's why we were so appreciative to have you on the call, because it is a snapshot that is being replicated, perhaps not at the same scale, but not far from that scale in other communities.
I agree completely.
Right.
I get the opportunity to this is kind of a unique position that the governing body created for this purpose specifically. Most municipalities do not have a point of contact that I am. So consequently, I get contact from surrounding communities all the time. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position statistically to help them. But the point is, and this goes back to something that Carlos was speaking about pre-positioned resources. It's something to keep in mind that it is valuable for a single point in contact who can redirect an inquiry with intelligence rather than the blanket call to the switchboard that says, I'm in trouble and I need help. That call winds up going around to 100 different people. Those calls wind up with me, and I slow people down to try to figure out what it is that they need help with, and then we can attempt to help them. Now, having said all of that, we bear some criticism from the public unfairly, but the contractors are using us as the whipping boy, if you will, for any kind of delay that takes place. And the fact is that in 90% of the cases that I've been involved with, the township did what they could do, but they didn't have the material to work with to be able to make decisions. So it's important that if you have a problem, and I don't care where the problem lies, that you know specifically what your problem is and try to call and get to the bottom of that problem one at a time.
Thank you. And Elizabeth, to your point too, I'm thinking, just again, how smart it was for Sue and the long-term recovery group to switch and recognize the value of getting those insurance experts in to help the homeowners get the money that they are due.
Exactly.
On their claims that way. Other questions, comments? We've got time now to open things up.
Yeah, this is Bob Kley from the Mental Health Association again. Just wanted to point out, too, we also focus a little bit, or just mention part of the conversation here, the fact of how many people were renters that were lost in the Sandy, were displaced, and the impact about lack of building affordable housing. And there was a recent article I just saw on the Sunday Star-Ledger of the amount of money, about $600 million, were set aside for Department of Community Affairs for Sandy affordable housing development to help restock the housing stock that was lost. And very little of that has really turned up at the shore. If you see the article, it's about 2,000 units have been developed, and only 15 people have been identified, and this is from the Department of Community Services data themselves. 15% were people that were clearly identified as having been involved in a damaged or destroyed property from Sandy. So I just want to put that on there, that we have a huge number of people. Most of them had been more of our most vulnerable populations, living in rented housing, lower income housing, that were impacted by Sandy, and the resources that were focused by the state there have really not developed, into a response to that yet. And I think we have a population of people that are still under the radar out there, who are living with family, who are living have been forced to move out of the area, and are still struggling in not solid housing because of lack of affordability in the area as well.
Hey, Bob, in one of the stat sheets that I was able to download from DCA, and this is again Toms River, that the heading is Fund for Restoration of Large Multifamily Housing. $35 million was committed, but only $5 billion was paid. $1 million, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Say that all over again. You got me lost, Trevor.
Okay, rental housing. We were talking about rentals.
Right.
funds for restoration of large multifamily housing. Obligated in Toms River was $35 million. Spent was only $5 million.
Okay.
So we're way behind in the amount the state has dispersed for us to be able to work with that. And some of that, I am absolutely sure, is lack of application, people making application for those funds.
Well, I think that's something from the entire community aspect is to look at making sure that we have develop that capacity to replace the housing, and looking for developers to do that.
As we speak, our master plan is being examined for updating, and hopefully we'll be able to include more than we did before. But since this is handled from the public sector, from the private sector, it is difficult for us to create incentives. We've got a number of projects working right now, but hopefully more will come forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Sue. I just wanted to follow up on what the gentleman was saying. So one of the other initiatives that we honestly just started last night was Walter Groups is one of the people that received some of that money to do affordable housing in Ocean County. And we have connected with him out of concern because in the fine print it does say that priority would be given to anyone affected by Sandy. So I called him up and asked him how he was making that happen. And, you know, they didn't really have a clear plan, nor was there any requirements for an outreach or ratios to do with that. So we invited him to the office and to speak to him, and if his true intent was really to get Sandy impacted families into these affordable housing units, we wanted to help facilitate that and make a partnership with him to host these workshops or presentations from Walter's Group with the long-term recovery group, and making sure that we were doing an extra effort to get out there and let the community know, because altogether what we talked about, we know people are not, many people who thought that they were going to get back home are coming to the harsh reality that they're not. And we wanted to make sure that they at least had the opportunity to know about this housing, to see if it is an option for them to complete their recovery, not exactly the way they want to, but at least they can stay in the community. So I'm not sure how exactly this is going to go, but it was last night they had standing room only at the presentation, and my counterpart at the long-term recovery group, Bridget, was there to, again, make sure that there is a connection and understanding that the priority would be given to Sandy families. So, you know, again, it's one of these things that as you evolve in this recovery, I think you have to be adaptable to what is happening and what the situation, because we never thought we would ever be doing a presentation with a for-profit builder. But in this situation, this is the right thing to do to the clients, especially those that are tied up with what Trevor mentioned. Many of those people who are not elevating those homes are senior citizens.
Right.
And they may never want to elevate those homes. But unfortunately, if they are substantially damaged, they're going to run into some trouble. So now having this option to them, if we're allowed to work with these people, you know, right now we have funding till the end of December. They're rolling out this housing until 2018. So while we're sitting here trying to scrape dollars together to keep our doors open, it is the case managers that are helping to connect their clients to this opportunity. So so I hope that our partnership will produce the most Sandy families in this housing program that is throughout the state, because it's in all the other counties, and I don't really know that many people at all from Sandy have been in any of that housing. So once we get a better handle on how exactly this is going to roll out, I will send that word out to everybody. And maybe they know a family member, a neighbor, somebody at church that maybe that harsh reality that they can't get back home, and we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to see this affordable housing projects that are going up.
Susan, if I could add one more thing. I get to speak with an awful lot of senior folks who don't want to raise their house, regardless of its status. That certainly is an issue, and I can understand it. Up until recently, I was able to advise them that they may qualify for a lift through a state program. That funding for that program has dried up. They've expended all of the funds that they had, and they won't be back in business again until the first of the year. So it's something for you to keep in mind for those people with either elderly or handicapped issues. That program has exceeded its funding.
Yet another.
Yeah.
Yet another.
Just yesterday, I got the call on that.
This is Kathy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I just want to say, and one of the reasons why I really, Nina, at the outset was kind of hopeful that this kind of a call could happen is because so much has changed, and there have been so many twists and turns, as Sue describes it, in the recovery process. And so much of what we do about philanthropy is about building community and finding solutions and thinking outside the box. And that's really what we need right now. We just need more of it. I hope that this call could create a new sense of urgency, that there are still thousands of people that are stuck out there in New Jersey that are trying to get home or trying to get back to where they were before the storm. And the resources are, for the most part, they are drying up. We work with trusted partners, many of them that you heard today, Long-Term Recovery Group, the Food Bank, the Mental Health Association, and a whole host of others. And these trusted partners are struggling to try to keep the doors open. And I'll just use Long-Term Recovery Group as an example. What happens for families when they're no longer there in December as a lifeline for these families? Where do they go to turn for help? And I think for those that are listening to this call today that are on the philanthropic side, if you could just take to heart what you heard today, reach out to another funder or share the messages that you heard today, and let's put our heads together and see how we can come up with a new game plan to try to help all these trusted partners that are still out there fighting this battle every day so that they can go on. I think the communities that we make other kinds of investments in, day in and day out, those other investments that we make will not be as valuable if we continue to see the economic impact of all of that is going on as a result of Sandy. So if you're listening to this call, or if you have a connection to another funder, I'm happy to be a part of any continued conversation among those on the call that are on the philanthropic side to see what kind of game plan we could come up with to try to keep this recovery moving forward. People have tried to go it alone, and as Sue mentioned, they did everything right, and they deserve better from our state. And while we've stepped up to the plate, a lot of what we did was funded those initial investments in immediate kinds of problems and solutions that needed to become up to go forward. But now we're at the part where it gets a little bit harder, and we have to dig in a little bit deeper and rethink again.
Thank you.
And I'll just add, I think that we need to learn from this experience, because the next disaster or some public event that we're going to need to respond to, it's going to be a lot of the same players, and we need to be positioned to really be able to respond effectively, learn from our mistakes, and really start from a better starting point.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you all so much. Please keep us informed. For the funders that are, on the call, and we've got our listserv. We want to continue to push information out. I'd be very happy to host a call with folks who might want to have a conversation and explore. I've got some thoughts about what might be helpful. I think this story, it's not, where things are, sort of the stats of where things stand right now, and what's needed, I would love a way to get that out to people. Our call today has provided a lot of information, but there's so many others that to be able to tell that story in some way, just in terms of the statistics of where things stand now, I think would be enormously helpful. So if there's anything like that that is coming along, or people are thinking about some sort of any kind of a report that might be able to, or even just bullets, would be enormously helpful. And so let's stay in touch and know that we want to do that. We want to continue to keep the information flowing, and if there's some way that we at the Council can help, everyone knows that to please reach out. With that, I will say thank you. We'll be sending a thank you follow-up to the Congressman, of course. It was wonderful to have him with us. Sue, Carlos, Robert, Trevor, Kathy, thank you for making today possible and sharing your experience and ideas. And you're doing God's work, and I just want to applaud what you're doing and that you've stayed with it. So with that, we'll wrap up for today and wish us all well.
Nina, can I jump back in for 1 minute?
Sure.
Trevor.
Call me Nina, though.
Nina, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
The DCA has a statistical dashboard that they update monthly, and you can drill it down to the community level, state, county, and community. It's got a tremendous amount of information on it, centered around, of course, state programs, but it will give you more statistics than you ever wanted to see.
And that sometimes can be overwhelming. So
I know.
If somebody's
that's why I'm a statistician, so I understand. I will send you the link.
That would be great. That would be great, and I'm happy to forward that out to folks. Terrific. Thank you all so much.
Bye now.
Bye. Have a good day.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.